All right, good morning everyone. Welcome back to our class. Today we are going to talk about teaching listening part 2. So what are we going to cover in this class? Well, in the previous class we have covered these 3 points. What listening involves, challenges in teaching listening, principles of teaching listening. And in this class we're going to cover as much of these points as possible. We have got 3 phases of teaching listening. We have got task-based, metacognitive instructions, so ideas of tasks that you can use in the classroom, an interactive model of listening comprehension, types of listening performance that you can do in your class, types of items and tasks for assessing listening. What can you do to assess listening? And we are also going to look at listening objectives and competencies as stipulated in the NSC syllabus. And after that, we are going to see how listening is assessed in the NSSCO, actually, syllabus, not the syllabus, but examination. The 3 phases of teaching listening. This is just similar to what the different phases that we have already looked at. They are very similar in their, in their philosophy of like the first phase to activate, to help the students be familiar with what they are going to do in the rest of the lesson. In other words, to prime the students' brains. And then the second one, that's where the actual skill is happening, just like what we have covered in reading and writing. And then the final one is the post. After they have listened, then what do they do? Pre-listening, while listening, and post-listenings are the 3 phases. So this sequencing frame for planning listening lessons offer teachers a flexibility to vary their activities according to their objectives and especially strategies that they intend to focus on in their classes. So there isn't so much of a cookie cutter of how you should present your content, but rather it gives you idea, creativity, and you are flexible to decide on what to include in these 3 phases based on your objective. Remember that the objectives and the competencies are what guide what you cover in these classes, as well as the strategies that you want to include within that phase. All right, what we'll see below is not the only way that we can present or teach listening in our classroom. You can use the same concept of pre-listening, while listening, post-listening, and use them and use different kinds of activities, tasks that can help you achieve the objectives of the lesson. I think I've just mentioned that already. Pre-listening. So a well-designed listening activity should be broken down into carefully sequenced phases that build on each other. So which means the first phase should be created in such a way that the second phase will be built onto the first phase, and then the third phase should be built onto the second phase as well as the first phase. The initial listening phase should prepare learners by helping them activate their background knowledge and clarify the expectation and assumption about the text. I think we've already spoken about that. Like, this is the phase where you activate the learner's background knowledge, the schemata, what they know regarding the aspects that you're going to cover within this listening lesson. Be it the content itself, be it the vocabulary that they need to know, be it the strategies that they need to know to understand that, to help them successfully complete the activities or tasks in the listening class. An ideal pre-listening task is one that which a teacher thoroughly, carefully constructed questions that helps the learners to activate their background information and language components needed to comprehend the text without giving them just too much information to the learners. So it's like I just mentioned, that whatever aid that is going to help them with the listening that they're going to do, but you don't provide them with answers. How about the while listening phase? So during the while listening phase, here is where the global comprehension takes place. And global comprehension we mean by understanding the very general idea or gist of the listening text after the first or the second listen. So while the learners or students might pick up some details about the first or after the first listening, our aim here should be to help them really focus on the general meaning first. So first of all, they should know what the general meaning of the listening text that they are listening, focusing on, so that they can establish preliminary framework that will enable them to get more details in the sequent listens. All right, so it's like really giving them the general idea of what the text is about, and then this will help them get the main ideas. And then the holistic listening also happens in the while listening, which expects the learners to listen to the whole text, while segmental listening. All right, so there's a holistic listening, which means that the learners needs to listen to the whole text as a whole. And then there's also segmental listening, whereby the learners listen for specific segments or specific parts of the text. So holistic listening should precede segmental listening. So which means holistic listening, like listen to the whole text to get the global idea of what the text is about, right? And then there's also the segmental, like part listening, that needs to come after they have listened to the whole text, all right? And then the holistic listening aims to allow learners to develop strategies and build stamina in the processing listening text. Segmental listening is very beneficial in such a way that it helps learners to intensively listen to the text, like listen for specific information from the segment that they are listening to. And then in doing while listening activity, it's important to remember the following. 1. Allow learners to listen to the text while text 2 or 3 times as a whole before going into intensive listening. And then encourage them to focus on the global meaning first, and then don't pose questions that ask them for details during their first listen. I think we've already mentioned that. And then also encourage them to make assumptions after they have done the first listening, and then verify these assumptions, the prediction that they have during their second listen. And then focus your questions and attention at this stage on the segments of the text that are accessible to the learners or students in terms of vocabulary and structure. And always remember that the students don't need to get everything in the text. I mean, they don't need to understand everything. Like, remind them of that, because sometimes they get discouraged when they don't understand certain parts of the text. So you can focus on the vocabulary and the structure, but not everything. That they don't need to get everything. So let's look at the intense listening during the while listening. So we've spoken about the global, the main idea, and then now we're going to focus mainly, and then now we're going to focus on the intense listening. During the intense listening, when designing listening activity, keep in mind that in addition to global comprehensions that we just spoken about, we need to focus our attention on intensive listening. So this is crucial to help learners develop effective listening strategy, build bottom-up listening skills, and in addition to top-down skills that are emphasized in global listening activities. So I think by now you do get the idea of like what is top-down and what is bottom-up. And if not, refer back to the notes that I have provided you in previous lessons. Intensive listening involves zeroing in, so like really focusing on into particular segments of the text, and this should come only after the learners have developed global comprehension of the text. So you focus on, I think we've already spoken about that, like focus on specific parts of the listening text after they have gotten the main idea, the main gist, the global understanding of the text that they've listened to. And then intensive listening may target different goals, such as, and then the goals depends on your objectives of the lesson. But let's look at the goals that can be accomplished within the intensive listening. 1. Getting more detailed understanding of some segments of some parts of the text. 2. Transcribing certain parts of the text. 3. Guessing the meaning of the word or words or phrases from context. Looking at certain grammatical structure within the text to see how they can aid comprehension. Okay, so those are the 4. And then now, intensive listening activities can be done in class or in the lab. If you have those, if you have the luxury of having a lab, which I don't think they are as common and often, and especially with COVID, I feel like some of those things have been limited in some points. But if you do have labs in your schools or wherever you go, make use of them. And then, or can be given as homework assignment. I feel like that's the homework assignment is a better option, but let's just hope that your learners have got the resources to do this type of listening. And then at the lower level of instructions, consider doing global comprehensive activities in the class to work as strategies and utilizing group work, and assign the intensive listening part as for homework. But then it just depends on which part of the country that you find yourself and what resources the learners have, because certain schools, we have to be honest, students do not have the resources. And then hopefully, the school has a radio, and then the learners can work in groups, and then they get to a class and then they do the listening together. But they should work in such a way that it shouldn't be copying, but getting or giving themselves a chance to really do the listening, and then they discuss the answers with their classmates. Post-listening, what do you involve in this phase? So the post-listening activity represents a follow-up to the listening activity and aims to utilize the knowledge gained from the listening for development of other skills such as speaking and writing. So after they have listened, then they have to obviously use other skills to work on or use what they have listened to. So if the class if the class listened to a TV program presenting a certain point of view regarding, let's say, mental health, as an example, right? The teacher can ask the learners then to do some research and identify some opposing views to what has been presented to them in the classroom. So that's what they can do. And then alternatively, the teacher may want to engage the discussion of the merits of the views that were expressed in the listening. So what are the advantages? Like, what good can come out of what they have listened to in the classroom? That could be a point that the teacher can ask the learners to discuss on. Pre-listening activities allow for recycling and further activation of vocabulary and structure, as long as whatever vocabulary and structures that are being presented are interesting, they are engaging and carefully thought out. So which means that when it comes to really like planning for the lessons, you need to think through everything that you present in the classroom, and then you should be engaging as much as possible, otherwise the learners will sleep in the classroom. All right, with that we have come to the end of the phases. The 3 phases that you can employ when you're teaching listening. Now we are going to look at the task-based metacognitive instructions, where listening tasks, looking at the listening tasks and activities that you can do in your classroom. Task-based metacognitive instructions involve a one-way or non-participatory listening tasks, and then two-way, which is called the interactive participatory listening task. All right. So what is this one-way or non-participatory listening task? I mean, I guess you can get the idea, like one way, just going one way. So this is a task where a learner is really not involved in any interaction, basically. All right. Non-participatory listening task. So the goal of a one-way listening is for learners to obtain information from the listening text with minimal or non-interaction at all with the speaker. Do you understand? Minimal or no interaction at all. And then these tasks require learners to understand the main idea of what being said without really needing to give an immediate response. So it's like getting information but not giving any immediate response. And then learners listen for different kind of spoken texts that are recorded or read aloud by the teacher, just as an example. Examples may include listening to or viewing recorded materials in a textbook, radio program, songs, films, television program, large lectures, and to some extent live speeches and presentation. So that's what they could do here. And the learners then use this information to achieve a variety of listening outcomes or, listening objectives or products, such as making lists, categorizing the information that they are given, editing the text, diagrams, like completing diagrams, drawing pictures, summarizing, taking notes, questioning, like answering questions, individual or group responses. So here are some examples of the activities that can be done and the skills, the skills or strategies that they may use. Or here we can look at this as competencies that we have in our syllabus or even objectives. And then the product that they need to kind of do or create or partake in, and the materials that you can use, all right, during this task, as well as the procedures, like the steps that you can follow to carry out this task. So let's look at this. The first one, we have got listening. Listen and restore is the name of the task. And then the skills that are focused on or are developed or are used are listening for global understanding or listening for details. So here, what is the product that they're going to use is to amend text in print. So to change, amend means to change the text, all right, as they listen. Materials, different types of listening text, such as a narrative and information report, the script of the text with incorrect details. So here is like they need to change, to amend whatever that they're going to listen to. And they need to correct that. Amend means to correct, change. All right. So first, students work individually or in pairs to read the printed text. So first they read the text, right? And then they discuss the gist of the text and then listen to the text once. So first, before they listen, they discuss with their classmates what the gist of the listening is. And then when they listen, again, they correct the details in the text, in the written text, by changing, adding, or deleting words. So that's a simple activity that the learners can do in the classroom. All right, so that's the first one. And the second one that they can do is listen and sort. Listen and sort. And then listening for so the skills that they work with here is listen for main ideas, listen for details, all right? And the product, so what they are going to do is a rearranged sequence of text or pictures. So what are the materials that you can use here? A text that describes a sequence, a procedure, a chronological event, and items in ranked order, sets of jumbled of texts, and or pictures. So what are the steps that you can follow to carry out this task? So the students work in pairs to examine the jumbled texts or pictures. So that's the first thing that they need to do. And then they discuss what the text might be about and sort the text picture according to their speculation. Oh, I love this. And then they listen to the text and use the information to sequence the pictures or text in the correct order. Do you understand? Sequence, put it in correct order. Now we are moving on to the other activities that they can do. So listen and compare. So listen and compare is the name of the task. And what skills are they going to work on? Listen for main idea or listen for details. So here we have got global listening and intensive listening. Okay, It's just to refer back to what we have already looked at. And then the product is a list of similarities and differences. Because here we are listening and comparing, right? So it's a list of similarities and differences. And then what materials can be used here is several short texts that have a common theme or topic. So you use texts that have the same idea, and then they need to compare or contrast this, or compare, basically. And here, what do we have? So 1, students listen individually to the text and then identify similarities and differences. Number 2, so the second step, is they compare their answers with another student to confirm what they have identified. Number 3, the class then listen to the text again and then check their answers. Oh, this is just brilliant tasks that you can use in the classroom. Next, so listen and match. So here, the skill or the competency or objective that is being focused on is for them to listen for global understanding. So global understanding of the text. And the product that they're going to do is text match to themes. All right, text match to themes. And then here the material that you can use is several short text that have different themes. All right, and then we've got theme cards, small cards with single word written on each one of the cards. Example: recycling, marriage, health. Right, and then note: teachers should prepare more theme cards than the number of texts. So you have got text and then themes that they need to match. You get. So the teacher checks that students understand the meaning of the words on the theme cards, right? And then 2, then the students listen individually to the text and then identify the most appropriate theme for each of the texts that they listen to. All right, so that's what will happen. So it's like they have to listen. The text you don't need to provide them with, but rather only the themes, and then you have to match these themes with what they are listening to. So they would number, for example, here number of themes. So let's say they have 5 themes, and then they have number of text. Number of texts that they're going to listen to, short text, are 4. We have got an extra theme that does not belong anyway. So they now need to match this listening text. So they will number 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they match the theme that they have with the theme with the text. Oh, this is just so good. And then next we've got listen and combine. So listen for main idea, and then listen selectively. So this is the skill, and then the product that they're going to kind of create or work with is a combined summary. What they need to do to produce is a combined summary based on the information from the different sources. So what type of material can you bring into the class? A fairly long text, example, a news broadcast, a narrative or procedure, and then divided into several parts. So what do the learners or students need to do? So students listen to one part of the text individually. So listen to the text individually, one part of the text individually, and then they make notes of what they hear. And then in small groups, then they report to one another and reconstruct a summarized form of the original text. So it's like they listen to the text. Listening text, and then they take notes, and then they come together, and then they combine their notes to make up the original, or as much as possible of what have been said in the text. Listen and compose. So here is another one that they have to do: listen and compose. So listen first, and then predict. Listening and predicting is the skills that they need to work on. And then listen and making inferences is also another skill or competency or objective, however way that you want to put it, that they need to work on, develop, or use during this activity. The product that they need to create or work with is the beginning and the conclusion of the text. So what material can you use in this task is a narrative, example, a short story with either the beginning or the ending of of that story missing. All right. So first, the learners listen to the text in pairs or in a small group. Okay. And then 2, they discuss what the text is about and what the missing part should be. All right. What is the text about? And then the part. Let's say if the beginning is missing, then what do they think the beginning should be? So creativity here. And then they listen to the missing part and represent. Okay, they write, not so they write the missing part, and then a representative write the part aloud. Representative reads the part aloud to the rest of the class. Oh, I love this. This is just like brilliant ideas. And then next, what do we have? Listen and evaluate. So the skills that they need to develop or the objectives or competencies that they need to develop is listen for details, listen for main idea, listening and making inferences depending on the criteria of evaluation. And the product is a list of items based on their relative merit. And then what do we have there? And then the material that you can use is several short text on a common theme or topic. So here the students then, first, the students listen to the text individually and assess the information or message based on predetermined criteria such as clarity, interest level, accuracy, and effectiveness. And then the second step that they need to do, students, they will get into groups or pairs and then their choices. So it's like really they are evaluating what they have been given. So they listen and then evaluate. What do they think about the clarity of the text? Was it clear enough? Was it interesting or not? Like at what level of interest does this listening text fall? And then we have got, was it accurate? Was it effective? Do you understand? They have to evaluate, to rate. And you can put this rate into a table form with a number. So accuracy, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 being the lowest in clarity and 5 being the highest in clarity. Interest, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 being the lowest in interest and then 5 being highest in interest. Effectiveness, do you understand? So, and then they have to rate based on what they have listened. And then when they get into groups, they explain why do they rate it at that level. All right, so that's what they have there. So the other task is listen and reconstruct. Listen and reconstruct. So recreating. The skill, listening for global understanding, listen for main idea, and listen for details. The product, a text that is reconstructed based on the content of the original information. Material that you can use, a short text, and such as information report, procedure, or exposition of a viewpoint. So the first step that they need to do is the students listen individually to the text once. Second step, they listen to it again and take note of key content words and key points in a text. For example, what is the problem? What is the solution? And what are the recommendations? What are the solutions and what are the recommendations? Number 3, they use their notes to produce a text that is in close meaning to the original. Ooh, that's nice. So they reconstruct with the information that they have gotten and then reconstruct. So that's what they can do there. Now we are moving on to the next. What is the next part that we are going to look at is the two-way participatory listening task. As you can see there, okay, before we move on to this one, you can see that first the learners listen. They just listen. After they have listened, that's when they do something else. The focus is a one way in terms of like, what do they do while they listen? They listen to the text. They don't do anything else. But first, before they listen, maybe they do some activities. And then after they have listened, they do another activity. But during the listen, they don't communicate. They don't respond. They don't ask any questions during the listening. And then next, we have got now the two-way participatory listening task. So we'll see how different it is with the previous one. So let's look at what it means, what it's involved in the two-way listening tasks. So the two-way listening task really engages the learners in interactions where they alternate between the roles of a listener and a speaker. So that's the difference when the listening is happening. It's like they listen and then they speak. Do you understand? So they alternate. Okay, and then they usually have to respond directly to what they hear, either to provide the necessary information or ask the speaker what was said. So that's the difference between the two types of tasks. So spoken interaction takes two forms. One, conversation, which are interpersonal in purpose. Two, encounter, which is more transactional, like getting information, like transactional, sharing information. Interpersonal is more like relational. And then these tasks could involve learners in conversation of either an informational or a formal in nature, in which ideas, information, and thoughts are shared. And then responses will also be affected by the perceived power relationship between the learner and other participants of the interaction. So it's like, the relationship that they have, the power has an effect on how they interact. Next, in listening tasks that involve transactional interaction, learners are asked to obtain information, goods, and services from other participants in their interaction. And then listeners may seek further clarifications, and then their use of language may be affected by the perceived degree of familiarity between them and the speaker. So it's like, if the learners are not very familiar with the person that they're working with, then obviously how they talk to them is going to be different. They'll be more formal, more respectful. Do you understand? It's just like the language, the interaction will be affected in some ways. And then these tasks require learners to listen to discourse of a dialogical nature, one that is jointly constructed by them and the other participant in an interaction. So listening outcomes may be similar to the ones in the one-way listening, but the process of achieving those outcomes tends to be collaborative. All right, collaborative, especially during the actual listening part. So examples may include casual conversation, telephone conversations, video conferencing, formal or semi-formal interviews, one-to-one or group discussions, some speeches and presentations where there are spontaneous interaction between the speaker and the audience. All right. So the listening tasks below give the learners opportunities to practice different listening skills as well as discourse strategies that can enhance their listening comprehension during the interaction. So here, in addition to practicing different ways of attending to spoken input, learners should also learn to use cooperation strategies to help them improve their comprehension. It's like, it's not a one-man's show. Like, they need to work with other people so that they achieve the goals and objectives of the tasks that they are working on. And then the teachers might find it useful to pre-teach some relevant questions, phrases that learners can use to seek help or clarification. I mean, like, you really need to teach them. For example, if they're having a discussion, how can they disagree politely? So these are some of the phrases that you teach them. If they need to ask politely for something, what type of language or questions should they use? Do you understand? You pre-teach this to the learners. For example, could you say that again, please? So politely. Instead of saying, what? They could use the phrase, could you say that again, please? I beg your pardon. Do you understand? You teach them such language. So here are some of the examples of tasks that they can do in the classroom. The first task is dictate and complete. And then the skill, listen for detail, listening for details, and listening selectively. The product is a restored and complete text. All right, material that you can use, different different types of listening text. So here example could be narrative, information, and information report. So you have version A and version B of the text with blanks inserted in different parts of the text. So you have a student A and student B, and then student A will have version A, student B will have version B. Version B will have some missing words that version A has, and then version A will have some missing words that version B has. So what do they need to do? So students will read their version to the of the incomplete text individually. All right, so they have to read that first, and then they take turns in dictating their version without showing to their partners. All right, and then the listener must ask for clarification and repetition where necessary, so that they get the missing information on their version, and then they write down the missing words in their version of the text. Oh, that's just like a brilliant task that you can do in your classroom, especially if you don't have like super huge classes. All right, next, describe and draw. Okay, describe and draw. That just sounds fun. And then what are the skills that they're working on? Listening for main idea, listening for details. And then the product is picture, maps, sketch, and objects. And then what materials can you use? Pictures of scenery and objects, plans and maps. All right. And then, so the first step, I'm already excited just reading this. So the first step is that the students work in pairs with one of them describing the content of the picture. And then step two, the other student draw it or complete a similar picture that is incomplete. All right, so that's what we have. And then number 3, the listener must ask for clarification and repetition when necessary. It's like they have this text and they need to draw what they are hearing. You understand? Or you can give them a partially drawn picture and then they need to complete it by listening what the reader is saying. That's just fun things that we can include in our lessons. Next, what do we have? We have got simulate and discussion. Simulate and discuss. So the skills: listening for main ideas, listening for details, listening and inferring, listening and predicting. And then the product is views and recommendation. Materials that we can use: cards with scenarios for simulation. Simulation is like acting out a role play. All right. Roles or statements of a problem or an issue, and the required outcomes such as sets of recommendation. That is just sounds really fun. So what is the first step? So the students form small groups to discuss a problem or an issue in the simulation. Role play or whatever. Simulation is like an acting out. All right. And then 2, a moderator or the chairperson in the simulation is assigned to ask questions, elicit views, like get views, challenge the assumptions that are given, and clarify understanding. So you have one moderator, or you can have 2 moderators if your groups are very big, or chairpersons, chair people. All right, number 3, students in their respective role listen to one another's view, make notes, respond to their views, and seek clarification. And then number 4, they agree on a set of outcomes following the discussion. It's like they have a problem, they discuss about it, everybody has points regarding this problem that they have, the situation of what is really happening, and then they make some sort of like recommendation, the outcomes that needs to happen to solve this problem, for instance. That's just an example of what they work on. And then next, they take note, and the name of the task is take notes and clarify. So that's the task. And then the skills that they're working on is listening for global understanding, listening for main ideas, listening for details, listening and making inferences. Okay, so that's what I have there. And then the product is a set of notes, a list of questions for clarification, for clarifying understanding of the content. And then what is the material that they're going to do? Presentation by students or guest speaker. So that's what they have there, or guest speaker. And then what are the steps that they need to do? First, the students need to listen to a presentation and take note. All right, take notes on the presentation. And then step 2, they review their notes, prepare some questions about the content of the presentation to ask the presenter. And the presenter could be the students themselves or a guest speaker who comes into the class to give a presentation. It's like during the presentation, other people's presentations, students don't just sit there and look at the other students present and daydream, do other things. You have to ask them to take notes and then come up with questions to ask their classmates, not just sit there and do nothing. So that's another way to keep the student engaged when the other students are presenting or other learners are presenting. So those are some of the examples that we have for the two-way task or participatory tasks, listening tasks. All right. For now, we are going to stop here, and then the rest of the lesson I will include in the following lesson, part 3. I will talk to you then.